So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for our incredible lineup of speakers. We're really excited to present tonight. I'd like to acknowledge first off that I'm on the traditional territory, unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples in what's now known as Vancouver. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Émile Boisseau-Bouvier.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à ce webinaire. Merci beaucoup pour votre participation. Je me situe aujourd'hui en territoire autochtone non cédé, plus particulièrement à Tiohtià:ke, sur les terres ancestrales de la nation Kanien'kehá:ka, la nation Mohawk, donc un endroit qui est connu aussi comme Montréal, Québec. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui.
And just a reminder for folks, anybody who's joined in the last few minutes, there's an interpretation button on the bottom right. If you want to click that, you can select your language, you'll be able to hear all the speakers. Today we have presentations from myself, from Émile, from Julian Napoleon, a member of the Saulteaux Nation, from Molly Wickham, a member of the Gidimt'en clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, from Tracy Saxby, organizer with My Sea to Sky, from Anna Bean from the Puyallup tribes in Washington State, from Camille Amélie, and I apologize, Koziek Levesque, from Coalition Fiol in Saguenay, and from Ken Summers from No Frack in Nova Scotia. So I'll just get started. I wanted to start out with with just some photos from some of my trips from northeastern British Columbia. You know, I think a lot of us have been fighting these liquefied natural gas projects because of the massive climate impacts and the impacts in our local communities. But very few of us ever have the opportunity to go and see where this gas is being extracted. And so it's somewhat out of sight, out of mind for most of the population of Canada. So I head up for a couple of weeks at a time with my drone and drive around taking photos of fracking infrastructure to bring that to the world. And every once in a while I'll be driving along a highway and I'll see just a big fireball on the horizon. And so try and work out sort of with Google Maps where that might be and drive down. But even when you're in it, you can't really get a sense of how the extent of the fracking. And so I actually, this last time I was up, drove up to the top of Pink Mountain and spent the night up there, and you can look out and see the whole boreal forest. And during the daytime, I mean, you have to have binoculars to see the infrastructure. It's this beautiful green and gold boreal forest in the fall. But when the sun goes down, I could see, you know, dozens, I counted 50 gas plants just lighting up the horizon, big glowing balls of fire that, you know, really filled the horizon in every direction to the east. And so it gives you a bit of a sense of what we're looking at here. For those of you who don't know, fracking is a process for extracting gas deep below in shale basins underground. This is the earlier part of a fracking operation in Farmington. And basically they mix fresh water from rivers and lakes nearby with silica sand, known carcinogen that's mined in Manitoba and other places, and then pump it underground at very high pressure to shatter open the shale rock and release the gas for extraction. This is a photo at Puskupi. You can see this is a little further on in a fracking operation. There's all sorts of trucks lined up to pressurize the frack fluid. And we saw dozens of water trucks come in and out of here in a matter of minutes when we were there. And this is just right next to people's homes. So I mentioned water. These operations use a tremendous amount of water, over 500,000 water trucks worth every year in British Columbia alone. This is a water hub from Tourmaline's Gundy operations. This is Inga Lake, a popular fishing and camping site, and a water supply right nearby for Celt's operations. You know, it's nearly as big as the lake. You can see how much water they've diverted from there. And this is ConocoPhillips, their wastewater ponds, and the industry will claim that they're recycling, but the water, but really what they're doing is just concentrating the chemicals inside, and ultimately, you know, it ends up being pumped back underground where it's gone from the water cycle forever. This is what they do with the solid waste. There's this is Tervita's Silverberry landfill in northeastern BC. There's dirt, contaminated soil trucked in from all over the region, and it's, you know, it's radioactive. It's got hydrocarbons in it. It's just a giant pyramid, basically, of toxic sludge, and kind of hard to tell in the photo, but this thing's about 50 meters tall, just sitting out there in the middle of the boreal forest. And there's just an incredible amount of land taken up. It's hard to actually get across the extent to which this forest has been industrialized. This is a compressor station from Kelt. And, you know, between well pads, pipelines, seismic lines, access roads, compressor stations, gas plants, an area the size, 4.5 times the size of Alberta's tar sands mines has been taken over, but it's spread out across such a vast region, it doesn't get as much attention. This is in Farmington, where this is in Canada's Saturna Island gas plant. And you can see, you know, it's just, these are family farms that have been pockmarked all the way along, all the way into the horizon there with these gas plants. This is up near Halfway River. It's a little video to show you, you know, in every direction, there is industrialization from the fracking industry. The Blueberry River First Nation is actually suing the provincial government in court right now for treaty violations because of the cumulative impacts, not just from fracking, but from forestry and other industries in their territory. 73% of their territory is within 250 meters of an industrial disturbance. And no. Anyway.
Donc, vous savez, là, je voulais juste remercier tous les gens là, qui...
projects across the country, and every LNG plant we stop is tens of thousands of fracking wells that don't have to be drilled in places like northeastern BC. Emile is going to talk a bit about LNG plants and the fight against.
Oui, donc est-ce que vous voyez bien mon écran? Je pense bien que oui. Bonjour, Émile Boisseau-Bouvier, je suis analyste des politiques climatiques chez Équiterre. Et puis, puisqu'on parle aujourd'hui des luttes contre l'exploitation de gaz naturel et puis son exportation par sa liquéfaction, le gaz naturel liquéfié, on va commencer la présentation par avoir un vocabulaire commun sur ce qu'il faut savoir sur le gaz naturel. Peter, tes images étaient très, très, très frappantes. Moi, je trouve ça désolant de voir ces images et je te remercie de nous les présenter. C'est malheureusement pas tous les jours qu'on a la possibilité de voir cette destruction. Donc, pour ma présentation, je vais commencer par un survol du gaz naturel. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Le gaz naturel liquéfié, par la suite, qu'est-ce que c'est? Quelles sont les émissions de GES qui sont liées à ça et puis quelles sont les perspectives d'avenir pour cette filière énergétique. Je vous donne un scoop tout de suite, ce n'est pas une énergie de transition. Donc, le gaz naturel, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est un gaz qui est inflammable. Lorsqu'on arrive en distribution, ce qui rentre chez vous peut-être, c'est un gaz qui est composé environ à 95% de méthane, du CH4, qui, lorsqu'il sera brûlé, va produire du CO2, le dioxyde de carbone, qui est le gaz à effet de serre le plus connu. Et puis, comment c'est arrivé le gaz naturel? Oui. Peter,
we can't see. We are seeing your notes, not the PowerPoint.
Sorry about that. Are you seeing the right screen?
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, comment on est arrivé là? C'est comme toutes les autres énergies fossiles, c'est la décomposition de matière organique sur des millions d'années qui a produit du gaz naturel, du pétrole et puis du charbon. Et puis, comment est-ce qu'on fait pour extraire le gaz naturel, il y a la façon conventionnelle. Donc, on va creuser un puits qui va permettre d'extraire le gaz naturel. Mais comme Peter vous l'a dit, au Canada, en fait, on a plus de 80% des nouveaux puits qui sont par fracturation. Ce sont les images que vous avez vues de Peter. Et Julian Napoleon va pouvoir vous parler par la suite des impacts qu'a la fracturation sur les communautés locales. Ensuite, comment ça arrive chez vous? Je ne vais pas faire tout le processus, mais c'est un long processus de production, de transmission, de distribution. Il y a plusieurs étapes. On y reviendra, c'est important. Et puis, qu'est-ce que ça donne concrètement? Ça donne un réseau tentaculaire. Vous voyez ici tous les gazoducs qui existent au Canada, qui partent de l'Alberta, de la Saskatchewan et qui se rendent jusqu'aux rives. Évidemment, il n'y a pas de gazoduc qui se rend en Europe, qui se rend en Asie. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'il y a plusieurs promoteurs qui veulent
We have a lot of promoters that want to develop these liquefaction, GNL, LNG, to export it on other markets that will bring us to LNG. LNG is the same product, but it's a product that we've cooled to a temperature that's extremely cold, minus 163 Celsius. So it takes a lot of energy just to liquefy the natural gas to export it. And also, once it's in Asia or in Europe, we need to de-liquefy it and distribute it again. So this is a lot of energy cost to do this. And when we're talking about the greenhouse effect linked to this natural...
C'est parler des émissions fugitives de méthane. Donc, le méthane, c'est le CH4 dont je vous parlais au début. C'est un gaz qui est échappé tout au long du processus. Que ce soit chaque flèche rouge que vous voyez, c'est une étape où il y a possibilité de fuite de méthane, que ce soit dû à l'usure courante, à la rouille ou même aux opérations journalières. Il y a toujours des émissions fugitives de méthane. Et puis le méthane, c'est un gaz à effet de serre qui a un potentiel de réchauffement climatique extrêmement plus élevé que le CO2. On le voit ici sur un horizon de 20 ans, il va venir réchauffer 84 fois plus notre atmosphère que le CO2. Bref, c'est une énergie. Toutes ces fuites-là vont venir augmenter les températures terrestres à un moment où on doit absolument éviter cela. On doit éviter de dépasser le 1,5 degré Celsius. Donc, à quoi ça ressemble si on exporte du gaz naturel canadien en Europe ou en Asie? On arrive avec un produit qui n'est que modestement moins polluant que la pire de toutes les énergies fossiles, que le charbon. Et puis, c'est modestement moins polluant dans les meilleures conditions, lorsqu'il y a le moins d'émanation de méthane possible. Dès qu'on arrive à des seuils qui varient, des fois, ça peut commencer à seulement 3 % de fuite de méthane, on arrive à des niveaux de pollution qui sont aussi grands que pour le charbon, la pire des énergies fossiles. Et je vous invite à regarder à droite de votre écran. On voit les panneaux solaires, on voit les éoliennes, il y aurait aussi de l'hydroélectricité dans d'autres cas, qui sont des énergies d'avenir, qui sont des énergies qui ont un impact beaucoup moins grand sur la planète. Et puis, qu'est-ce que ça mène comme perspective pour le gaz naturel dans l'avenir? Eh bien, c'est des perspectives qui ne sont pas très glorieuses pour cette filière-là. En fait, l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, une agence qui a été qui a été créée à la base pour faire la promotion du pétrole, si on veut, nous indique que si on veut atteindre l'objectif de carboneutralité d'ici 2050, si on veut éviter d'émettre TGES d'ici 2050, il y a exactement 0 nouveau projet de gaz naturel qui est nécessaire. La plupart des terminaux de liquéfaction vont être inutiles. Pourquoi? Simplement parce que la demande ne sera pas là. Si on regarde au cours des années 2030, sur la partie à droite du graphique, la demande mondiale pour le gaz naturel va diminuer de plus de 5 % par an en moyenne. Et puis, si on regarde pour ce qui est du gaz naturel liquéfié, les échanges de gaz naturel liquéfié vont diminuer de 60 % entre 2020 et 2050. Ce sont donc des investissements. Si on investit aujourd'hui, en 2021, dans des infrastructures fossiles de gaz naturel, ce sont des infrastructures avec lesquelles on est pris pour 30, 40, 50 ans, le temps de rentabiliser les investissements. Et puis, c'est absolument incompatible avec nos objectifs climatiques, mais c'est même incompatible d'un point de vue financier. Il n'y aura pas de demande pour répondre à cette offre supplémentaire de gaz naturel. En conclusion, ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que le gaz naturel n'est définitivement pas une énergie de transition. Pourquoi? Parce que tout nouveau développement de gaz naturel, que ce soit en production, en transport ou en liquéfaction, va venir aggraver la crise climatique et va venir nous empêcher de limiter le réchauffement climatique à 1,5 degré Celsius. Et puis même d'un point de vue économique, c'est une forme d'énergie qui est de plus en plus délaissée par les investisseurs. Et puis, c'est une bonne nouvelle pour les différentes parties ici, les différents panélistes qui sont aujourd'hui, qui vont vous parler des luttes concrètes sur le terrain, comment on fait pour éviter de propager le gaz naturel à l'intérieur du Canada, mais à l'extérieur de ses frontières aussi. Je vous remercie beaucoup, les panélistes qui êtes là aujourd'hui. Votre expérience terrain est très nécessaire. Et puis, je vais passer la parole à Julian Napoleon, qui va nous parler des impacts de la fracturation sur les communautés locales de la Colombie-Britannique.
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm just going to turn a light on here. It got really dark. Let's see how this is. So apologies. I'm up in the Northern Rocky Mountains right now at my nation's caribou maternity pen in a little off-grid cabin doing this off a cell booster. So I might have some connection issues, but it seems to be working all right. So yeah, I'm mixed ancestry. I'm Daneza and Cree, and I live on my reserve, which is currently known as Soto First Nations at Moberly Lake in northeastern BC. And we are one of the communities that's in the epicenter of oil and gas activity in so-called British Columbia. Last time I looked at the numbers, we had somewhere in the area of 16,000 frack sites within our territory, and the Montney shale gas development proposal was looking at putting upwards of 50,000 more. So it's all around us. The industry was really booming when I was just coming out of high school. So I kind of witnessed, when I was a young kid in my territory, we didn't have the sites I could do. And then I witnessed that first big boom and then a bit of a lull around my community. And now it's kind of picking up again. And there's a push for a whole bunch more development. We got a couple of pipelines coming through right now with temporary man camps situated around our service providing town of Chetwynd, the closest town to our reserve. So what we've seen with that fracking, right? Like they came into some of our most important hunting areas around our community area, just directly east of our community called Del Rio, which is our most important moose hunting area. And then another area called Burrow Prairie, just by Hudson Hope. And they put in a massive amount of frack wells there. And post that activity, right, like all the elders in the community started to not feel safe for us to hunt there. And it was qualitative information, but we did have community members see some different kinds of cysts and growths on the moose that we had never seen before. And so we basically stopped going to those areas, and we're fortunate that we did have a few other areas around our community where there wasn't oil and gas activity, but our relatives up in communities like Doig and Blueberry got completely surrounded. So, but we stopped going to those areas to hunt, to pick berries. And interestingly enough, there was some research conducted looking at the environmental toxicants released, volatile organic compounds that are released from frack sites. And these chemicals are known to be extremely harmful, in particular to living creatures that are pregnant, in utero, causing all types of birth defects. And this study looked at pregnant women in our local hospitals and found that these environmental toxins, these known carcinogens, they found them to be disproportionately higher in the indigenous women from my nation. So right there, it goes to show that what was the kind of qualitative observations from community members was very much validated through the scientific method, showing that our traditional foods are now potentially going to give us cancer and poison our babies in the womb, and not just us, but all the living creatures out on the land. And this is what we have to live with now and all over our territory, is that we no longer know if it's safe for us to go out and hunt and eat our meat and eat our fish and eat our berries. These things get airborne and they're all over. So it's a major issue. The Canadian government refuses to conduct any environmental monitoring of these compounds. So they're basically refusing to acknowledge the reality of what's happening here. Similar to what Emil mentioned with the fugitive emissions, right? They're not looking at that data either when they try to present it as a green alternative, which it very much isn't. And when this study came out, and there'll be further studies that we're supporting, working with this researcher from Quebec, because the government's refusing to do so. So we'll try to delve into it further. It's difficult. We got coal mines all over too, right? So there's multiple exposure points, but these toxicants that are getting tracked are specific to fracking. So we know they're there. But I started to really dig into it, like it's all over, it's ubiquitous in my territory. And, I started to dig into the economics of it and the real environmental reality, and saying, what is it for that they would be willing to sacrifice the safety of my people and really violate our treaty completely by poisoning our food and fish and water. And it's crazy because the industry has never been profitable, and if historical patterns suggest anything, it never will be profitable. It's really poor economics. Basically, the only way it can operate is by being subsidized, and the majority of the companies that are doing the extraction are foreign owned. Some of the pipeline companies are Canadian owned, but basically the industry is propped up by subsidies, and the extraction costs and processing costs far exceed the market value of the product. So, it's I think a big part of it is to present public rhetoric of economic development that people that aren't delving into the subject and able to analyze with any sort of independent critical thought take at face value as being good for the economy, when in reality it's the opposite. It's a draw on the economy with little to no benefit for the general public. So it's all this facade. So it really breaks my heart to think that our kids, pregnant individuals and children aren't safe, that our traditional foods aren't safe, and for what? For nothing, for perpetuating lies. So it's it really is just a losing situation. It's it's tied to Site C too. They're putting that in our backyard, and by all means, that project is to provide publicly subsidized energy to keep this facade moving forward, because it is so energy intensive, you know, and the reality is that the easily accessible stuff already has been extracted. You know, it's now taking 5 frac sites to produce as much gas as one would have produced historically, you know, and then they have traditional oil extraction here where they continue to burn off the gas, hence the flare pits all over. So the whole industry is just grossly mismanaged. And, you know, at that 16,000 frac well point that I had mentioned earlier, as demonstrated in Peter's pictures, there's already basically a 75% impact across our territory of oil and gas industry and supporting infrastructure. And I can't even begin to fathom, you know, if they see through with their development plans for the Montney play, you know, and 4X that development, what the landscape will look like here afterwards. There'll be absolutely nothing left. And we already have exploratory seismic lines over the vast majority of this landscape that are done in a crisscross grid, overlapping each other 3 to 4 times at different angles as they look for sites to put in wells. So it's, yeah, the impact's astounding. I mean, those photos didn't even really do it justice. You have to come out here and see on the ground, you know, and there's pockets now of low-lying ground where particularly poisonous gases such as H2S accumulate, and just walking out in the bush here, you could hit a pocket that will kill you. You know, blueberries had to be evacuated multiple times due to approaching H2S gas into their community. So it's a disaster. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. I know we got short windows here, so yeah, thank you all for the work that you're all doing and for being here today. Masicho.
Thank you so much, Julian. That was really powerful, and yeah, just you know, solidarity and support with your community and the impacts that they're facing. I'll move us on to Molly Wickham from the Gidimt'en clan of the Wet'suwet'en, and their very long and hard fought fight against the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Go ahead, Molly.
Hadi, Denise, Takaise, Skyse, Sai, Slato, Sydney, Gidimt'en Hesley, Wet'suwet'en is Den. My name's Molly Wickham. My Cassia name is Slato. I belong to the Grizzly Bear House of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And I just want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I also want to thank Julian there for telling us and sharing with us the impacts that are on the other end of this pipeline. And I'll talk a little bit today about the Coastal GasLink project and the impacts that it's had on us. It's a 670 kilometer fracked gas pipeline planning to feed LNG Canada's liquefaction and export facility. We believe that it's going to be dependent on power from the Site C dam, as well as they will have to burn their own fracked gas to provide enough power for the liquefaction process. The investors and the owners of this company are a private equity firm called KKR and AIMCO, which is Alberta's pension funds, as well as TC Energy, formerly TransCanada, and which are 35% owners. It's funded majorly by Canadian banks, RBC, Bank of Montreal, CIBC, Scotiabank, and TD, US banks such as JP Morgan Chase, and international banks as well. Under Wet'suwet'en law, we govern ourselves through our clan system, and our hereditary chiefs have full. We've never provided consent for the Coastal GasLink pipeline. We've never extinguished title to our territories, and therefore we will continue to govern our territories according to Wet'suwet'en law. This project has failed to establish any sort of meaningful policy to deal with Indigenous consent and has worked with the province, so-called BC and so-called Canada, to undermine our traditional hereditary system by making deals with the government-imposed elected band council systems, which were put in place to eliminate our true Wet'suwet'en governance system, which controls Wet'suwet'en land and access to Wet'suwet'en land. I want to talk a little bit about why we are here and why we're resisting and the importance of our water. And thank you for showing and talking about how much water is used in these processes. And I think that's really important because one of the main things that we're trying to protect is Wet'suwet'en. Wet'suwet'en is our sacred headwaters. It's where all of the salmon come, return, and spawn. We have occupations throughout our territories. The Unistoten clan, they have an occupation that they have a multi-million-dollar healing center that's been there for 10 years almost. People are living out on the territory. Gidimden Checkpoint was constructed in 2018. We all drink the water directly from Wet'suwet'en. It's where the streams and the tributaries to Wet'suwet'en are where the Pacific coho come to spawn. All of our salmon and all of our resources are tied into this watershed, and they plan to go underneath Wet'suwet'en or through Wet'suwet'en. CGL has not yet decided or determined how they're going to pass through our sacred headwaters. But we know that if everything goes right, if everything goes as planned according to them, we will still never, ever be able to drink that water again due to the sediment alone. They will destroy ancient salmon spawning beds just by digging underneath the river. Or trenching through the river would devastate all of those things that make us who we are as Wet'suwet'en people. We know, we've heard stories about people on the other end in the fracking wells. We don't want that to be our reality. We can still drink from this river. We know the impact that it's going to have, that it's already having on our animals, on our territory, on our ability to access our territories. There are 5 private security companies that surveil and harass us on a daily basis in our own territory, that threaten us with arrest for conducting ceremonies on our territory, for harvesting food to feed our children from our territory. We know that this is going to be an ongoing fight. We know that these are the sacrifices that we have to make right now, but we also know that we have to do this because we have no other choice. We are literally fighting for our lives as Wet'suwet'en people. If we don't win, we know that that will be a contribution to the genocide of our people, because we won't have clean drinking water to feed our children. We won't have salmon for all of the 7 next generations. We won't be able to hunt our moose. This past year was the first time, with all the CGL activity in our territory, was the first moose ever that we harvested, and we rely almost wholly on wild meat from our territories. And it was the first time that we had ever found sick organs and sick animals in our territory. Getting a moose a year is a family affair that everybody participates in. And when we open that up, the children would drink the moose blood from the heart, because that's one of our initiations. That's one of our practices, to share that with the animal that we're taking and to respect and honor that animal. And for the first time, and since we've been living out on the territories for the last 7 or 8 years, we couldn't do that because all of the organs were full of cysts and sores, and we'd never seen that before. And so I hear the devastation that's happened to other territories. We know as Wet'suwet'en, as Gidimden, our responsibility to uphold Anaknuaten, our responsibility to ensure that we have to fight and take whatever means necessary to ensure that the health and well-being of our territories survives our children and our grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren. So thank you for sharing. We're going to continue the fight. this fall, they're planning to drill under Woodfibre. They were planning to do that in the last quarter of last year, and we were able to, through a variety of different means, they were delayed over a year. And so now they have had to wait a full year, to the point where now in the last quarter of this year, they were planning to make the move and drill under Woodfibre. And so we're really looking for as much support as we can get during these times leading up to that, and looking at this fall to raise awareness, come out to the territories, come and see. I would love to go and actually bring our people to go see the fracking wells, and to show them what we've seen today, and for people to come and see what we're protecting and the things that we're, sorry, that's my alarm. Time's up. And to see all of the things that that we're fighting for as well. So thank you for having me. Oh, it's Masai.
Great. Thank you, Slato, Molly, and yeah, just so much support for your community. You've done so much, and continue to fight. So I'll be with you. Next up, we have Tracy Saxby, the Executive Director of My Sea to Sky, who has been fighting the Woodfibre LNG project in Squamish. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Tracy Saxby. I am a marine scientist and I am an activist, and I'm currently the Executive Director of My Sea to Sky. Before we begin, I'd respectfully like to acknowledge that we work in the traditional unceded territories and ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And today I'd like to share a little bit about our campaign to stop Woodfibre LNG. So this story also starts in Northeast BC, where the owner of Woodfibre LNG has recently bought a fracking company, Pacific Crane Energy. The frack gas will be transported via a network of pipelines to Coquitlam, where FortisBC is proposing to build a new 24-inch high-pressure pipeline to the Woodfibre site. If you are a FortisBC customer, you will be paying for this pipeline. The pipeline goes right through residential areas, and FortisBC is recklessly putting residents at risk. And Fortis is also planning to drill a 14-foot wide tunnel underneath the Squamish estuary for 8.7 kilometres that will result in acid rock drainage, similar to what we see with Britannia Mine in Howe Sound. Woodfibre LNG itself is located 7 kilometres southwest of Squamish on an old industrial site where the pulp mill used to be. It's a smaller facility with a storage capacity of 250,000 cubic meters, and they plan to export 2.1 million tons of LNG every year. However, this project may double or triple in size in future. The project consists of an onshore liquefaction plant, which is essentially a giant fridge. The frack gas is cooled to minus 162 degrees Celsius, and then it will be stored in these two floating storage units. Woodfibre LNG has bought two 40-year-old tankers to use as these floating storage units, which is extremely concerning because typically an LNG tanker only has a lifespan of 25 years. But Woodfibre wants to retrofit these two 40-year-old tankers for another 40 years. So that means if Woodfibre operates as planned for 40 years, then these two floating storage units will be 80 years old at the end of life. Then on the right, you can see there's a 115-meter high flare stack that could affect migrating birds and endangered bats. And during construction, there's also a flotel or a floating hotel or a work camp for about 500 workers. Once the LNG is cooled, or the fracked LNG, it will be shipped in super tankers through Howe Sound, which will bunker in Vancouver, pass through the Salish Sea, go past Victoria to customers in Asia. Woodfibre LNG was a pet project for Premier Christy Clark and the Minister of Natural Gas Development, Rich Coleman. The owner of Woodfibre LNG is an Indonesian billionaire, Sukanto Tanoto, whose companies have a history of tax evasion, human rights violations, and animal rights violations. So a lot of the reasons that LNG is a bad idea has been covered already. So I'm just going to list five reasons that Woodfibre LNG is a terrible idea. LNG will increase flat fracking and methane pollution. Locally, Woodfibre LNG threatens the amazing recovery of Howe Sound with direct and indirect impacts on herring, salmon, whales, and migratory birds, to name a few. Both Woodfibre LNG, the tankers, and the Fortis pipeline put the health and safety of residents at risk. And Woodfibre LNG needs massive subsidies to be economically viable. We've calculated that Woodfibre LNG will receive subsidies and tax breaks equivalent to $50 million a year. And that breaks down to $500,000 per job per year. And they still have their hand out for more. And finally, LNG is a climate disaster. This one project will produce 1.5 times the greenhouse gas pollution of the entire community of Squamish. And that's not including the upstream emissions from fracking or the downstream emissions from shipping, regasification, or when the gas is burned by the final customer. So My Sea to Sky is a people-powered environmental organization that was founded in 2014 to defend, protect, and restore Howe Sound. We have successfully defended Howe Sound for 7 years now. We have brought communities from around Howe Sound together. Our movement is intergenerational, and it amplifies and supports Indigenous voices. Woodfibre LNG planned to begin construction in 2015, but in 2021, there are still no shovels in the ground. This is people power in action. Working closely with allies from Squamish Nation, we have held demonstration after demonstration after demonstration. And over the last 8 years, we have come together with a vision for the future that we want. We want to protect Howe Sound for future generations. And we envision a future in which our Katzum Howe Sound's thriving ecosystems support regenerative communities. And we want climate action now. So the current status of Woodfibre LNG, they keep on delaying their final investment decision. Right now, according to the media, they're meant to be making a final investment decision in Q3 of 2021, but we believe that that has been pushed back again to 2022. They're currently going through an amendment to their environmental assessment certificate for the flotel, which is essentially a work camp. They have committed to be net zero emissions by 2050, thanks to a lot of organizing work that we did last year. And as a result of that, they've signed an agreement with Carbon Engineering, but they now have their hand out saying, well, hey, if you guys want us to be net zero, we can do that, but we need an additional $1.3 billion. So they're looking for $1.3 billion from the provincial or federal government so that the project can be carbon neutral. It's just absolutely ridiculous. There's no management plans, there's no tax agreement, there's no security plan, there's no term process, there's no contractors, and they don't have any buyers. Yet the project still seems to be moving inexorably ahead. So what you can do to help is go to myseatosky.org. You can sign the Howe Sound Declaration. We've got more than 20,000 signatures. We also have a campaign that we're working on with several other organizations to end fossil fuel subsidies. So you can send a letter to tell Premier Horgan to stop funding fracking through all of the fossil fuel subsidies that they're giving to fracking companies and LNG companies. And you can sign up to our mailing list to stay tuned for more actions as they come available. And I'd like to pass it back to Peter, who's going to talk about Tilbury LNG.
Thanks, Tracy. Unfortunately, Tilbury LNG, our speaker Peter wasn't able to make it today, but there's just so folks know, there's an LNG plant proposed for Delta in British Columbia, on Tilbury Island, kind of right between Delta and Richmond. That would be pretty significant. It's just kind of getting underway in its environmental assessment. They have to come back by the end of August with their project description and addressing all the issues that that folks have raised. And there's a community of folks who are opposing it. So stay tuned to the Wilderness Committee and other groups here in the Lower Mainland to hear more about that. But I will move us on to Anna Bean from the Puyallup tribes in Washington State, whose community has fought against Puget Sound Energy and Tacoma LNG for years now. So please, Anna, take us away.
Haxlahel o CEA DCIA Yatchalap, Tudi D Seatsta, Anna Bean Seatsta, Spoyal Paps Chad. Good day, honorable friends and relatives. My name is Anna Bean. My Indian name is way over there. I'm a Puyallup tribal member, and I currently am serving on our Puyallup Tribal Council. The LNG PSE, Puget Sound Energy LNG facility was proposed in 2014. I think they slid a lot of things under the radar of the proper permitting and consultation. It's to be an 8 million gallon holding tank down here on the Tacoma Tide Flats in Washington State, right in the heart of our ancestral land of the Puyallup tribe. It's actually and first of all, I also want to say thank you for the invitation to today's event. Thank you to everyone of the panelists who've been on here to share your story. A lot of everything that you guys are going through, my heart goes out to you all, especially at the level of impact of affecting your drinking water right now, and your salmon. I'm sorry, I'm kind of blown away by all of that. You know, to see sometimes when you're in the middle of this, you feel like you're the only one going through it, and to know that we are clearly not alone. And a lot of your areas are very rural areas, and ours is in the heart of the port of Tacoma. And it's a very urban area, and it's very concerning to us. You know, we also are salmon people here, and it comes from, you know, it comes at the mouth of like the river of where this is at. So if you notice, like where a lot of the LNG facilities that you have presented and shown are typically out in a very rural area, not right next to homes. This LNG facility is within a mile of daycares, homes. It's literally looking across from, I'm sorry for the light here, because I thought it would be nice to show you guys the port, but I don't think you guys can really see it. I'm in a trailer down by the port right now. I was going to try to show you guys the facility so you guys can see it. The port that I'm sitting next to is one of the deepest ports on the West Coast. And so anyhow, to go back into what the fight and everything that we've been in, the SEIS and everything like that, the environmental impact statements, all of that, they have changed since the onset of this project. They continue to change those. We have gone, most of this has been fronted by grassroots movements here, the No LNG fight in the 253. You know, it's a lot of our surrounding community, and it's been very difficult to get folks to be involved that live here, because it's down on the port. It's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. Unless you're driving down here or have any reason to be down this way, it's not concerning to a lot of people. And I don't know what kind of struggle a lot of you are in with getting your own communities to be involved. It's very frustrating sometimes for us, even though we do have members. We Puyallups call ourselves the water warriors, and you know, folks are more excited to like wear our shirts or have our stickers as opposed to coming standing with us and really letting these agencies around here know that how serious this is to all of us and how many of us are really concerned. We have been hitting this on all levels of city, state, county, and trying to hit it from every type of way we can. And all of the agencies that we have met with since I've had it as a grassroots member myself prior to getting on tribal council, you know, before I wasn't able to get into most of the places that we were trying to discuss matters with, or having to fight to get into them. And now as an elected official, I'm actually able to sit down with these folks, and that becomes even more frustrating because the lip service is very real, and what they say they will do and how they will help, and folks who have the authority to assist in the closure or stopping of this project have really failed us throughout this whole entire process that we've been in this. I myself have been involved in this since April of 2017. I have no background. I had no understanding of what LNG even was. I was actually holding a sign in November 2016 that said "Stand with Standing Rock," and on the backside it said no LNG. I had no idea what LNG even was, and so having to find that out, and here I am, because once you know what this is and how it can affect your land and your community, your air, your water, you kind of know that. So we eat, sleep, and breathe this conversation, and it's been really difficult. Right now we are there in the end of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency had issued the final permit in order for them to fully get up and running, and the Puyallup tribe and other agencies, or other of our folks that fight the LNG along with us, have taken them to court, and we are currently in court. And so there's unfortunately not a lot to say as we are in that process right now. And it's just frustrating. It's like the sitting and waiting and going at this for years. I'm sure a lot of you who have been in a part of your movements, or going through what you're going through, it gets exhausting. You get burnt out, you get tired of seeing the same people every single day. But you have to keep fighting. And clearly my phone is fighting to keep me from looking at you guys. I'm sorry. I've had no problems this whole time with my phone. Anyhow, so it's a lot of work. And you're waiting for that light at the end of the tunnel. And in this case, we're talking about pipelines, and they have I want to say it's a 16 to 18 inch pipeline that goes through. It's not nearly as large as some of the ones in your guys' areas, but it goes through the port into the city of Fife and up through Tacoma, by a school, by daycares, all of these areas, without most of the people around. When I talk about proper consultation, they're building this by people's homes. And we, in our process, actually went and knocked on some of those doors to see if they were even made aware. So these things are, even though they become monsters and they're big, they're snuck in like thieves in the night. Like you wake up one day, and I remember when I came down to the LNG facility before it was even really up, they had it fenced off to where you couldn't see what they were doing on the inside. And, we have done a lot of actions that, shut down any kind of work for the day. Those are the small successes that we share. We've pushed it on a lot longer, and we're waiting for, for our fight to have not just been for not the end result that we wanted. And we're in those final hours here and I'm really frustrated. I sit there and you look right in these people's faces, and you tell them how they're affecting your community, and how, like, it's literally, when we're talking about the utilization of water, on both sides of the LNG facility, there are waterways here. And there's no concern about what it's going to do. It's sitting across from our tribal marina where our fishermen go out and crab, and water temperatures are rising. It baffles me that people still have yet to take in that climate, that we are in a serious climate crisis here. It's getting hotter. our mountains are, you know, not as capped off with the snow as it once used to be. Our summers are getting hotter. It's, you know, it's hotter in spring. And I mean, I don't know what the climates are in your guys' areas, but everything is being affected, and going through this time frame and feeling like nobody's understanding or hearing you out, and like you're just knocking on doors and walls and knocking your head up on things. It's just very frustrating. It's like, when are we going to see some resolve from what we're doing? And I just, and like I said, for us here at the PSE LNG area, we're in the final stages, and now we just wait. And you know, we have one of our elders who, you know, says that, you know, she would like to just take a one of those I don't know what they are, like tractors or something like that, one of those bulldozers. She wants to take a bulldozer and just like knock it down. And you can see it. Before, you could say it was out of sight, out of mind, but we were doing an event down on the other opposite end of the Tacoma. Okay, sorry, it's my time to wrap up. Anyhow, so you can see it from anywhere now. It is that large. It's an 8 million gallon holding tank. So thank you guys for your time. Sorry I didn't get enough out there, but if anybody can think of anything that would be helpful when you're in the final hours, please reach out and let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Merci beaucoup. Keep on the fight. On va maintenant se transporter sur la côte est canadienne pour voir deux projets contre lesquels on se bat, en commençant avec Camille Amélie qui va pouvoir nous parler de GNL Québec. Camille Amélie, à toi la parole.
Allô tout le monde, donc mon nom est Camille Amélie Lévesque. Je suis la co-porte-parole de la coalition Fjord. Donc rapidement, je nous présente, on est un regroupement citoyen, donc vraiment grassroots qui a été fondé en 2018. On milite pour la protection du fjord, la protection écologique du fjord du Saguenay. Donc c'est au Québec, dans la région administrative du Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, sur le territoire Innu non cédé du Nitassinan. En fait, la coalition Fjord s'est vraiment fondée sur des inquiétudes simultanées avec des projets industriels qui arrivaient en même temps dans la zone du fjord du Saguenay. Donc, en fait, il y a le projet GNL gazoducs, mais également deux projets miniers. Donc, pour vraiment focuser sur GNL gazoducs, en fait, c'est comme deux entités, si on veut, mais ce sont les mêmes promoteurs américains. C'est d'abord, c'est en trois étapes, en fait. C'est d'abord la construction d'un pipeline de 782 km entre l'Ontario et le Saguenay. C'est ensuite la construction d'une usine de liquéfaction de gaz au Saguenay, vraiment sur les abords du fjord. Et puis ensuite, c'est le transport maritime dans le Saguenay puis le Saint-Laurent par méthaniers. Donc, ça vise les marchés internationaux de l'Europe et de l'Asie. Puis, justement, bien sûr, il y a des impacts terrestres, mais une de nos préoccupations principales, c'est les impacts maritimes, donc les impacts cumulatifs. C'est-à-dire que le fjord, c'est vraiment un écosystème particulier. C'est aussi un des habitats principaux des belugas du fleuve du Saint-Laurent puis du Saguenay. C'est un lieu de repos pour eux. Donc, en ce moment, il y a déjà environ 450 passages de bateaux, quand même des gros bateaux par année. Avec le projet GNL gazoduc, on parle d'un ajout de 400 passages par année. Donc, évidemment, tout ça va causerait beaucoup de pollution sonore qui nuirait à la communication puis aux belugas, en fait, y compris avec la période de construction. C'est aussi l'augmentation de la présence physique dans le fjord, donc des risques de collision pour les belugas, pour les baleines dans le Saint-Laurent, mais également c'est aussi des conflits d'usage potentiels avec les autres usagers du fjord. Et on parle aussi de risques d'apparition d'espèces invasives. Et avec les deux projets miniers, bien, évidemment, l'écosystème marin du fjord serait grandement dégradé. Donc ça, c'est une de nos inquiétudes principales quant au projet de GNL gazoduc. Mais la deuxième, c'est également les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Donc, comme ça a été présenté tout à l'heure, il s'agit de gaz de schiste qui est issu de fracturation. Puis, si on prend l'ensemble du cycle de vie, de l'extraction jusqu'à la consommation du gaz, en comprenant aussi les fuites, il a été confirmé dans le rapport du BAP que ça équivaut à 50 millions de tonnes d'équivalent de CO2 par année. Donc, finalement, ça revient en fait à l'équivalent de 10 millions de voitures. C'est vraiment catastrophique sur le plan climatique. Du point de vue économique, c'est aussi un projet qui va coûter cher au Québec, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a des tarifs préférentiels qui sont octroyés à l'usine et au gazoduc. Donc, ils capitalisent énormément sur un argumentaire carboneutre, sur l'usage de l'hydroélectricité. Donc, il y a d'autres usines de liquéfaction dans les autres projets au Canada qui consomeraient leur propre gaz. GNL, en fait, parle d'utiliser l'hydroélectricité produite au Québec. Cependant, ça finirait par augmenter de 10 milliards les coûts aux abonnés d'Hydro-Québec, donc étant donné que la consommation est énorme. Seulement pour l'usine, on parle de 4,7 térawattheures. Donc, c'est l'équivalent d'une consommation de 200 000 résidences. Donc, ça, c'est un argument qu'on avance, en fait, parce que ça concerne l'ensemble du Québec. Également, la structure financière du projet, ça favorise aussi des investisseurs puis des promoteurs, en fait, qui, finalement, iraient dans les paradis fiscaux. Mais sinon, localement, ça a aussi un impact. Donc, avec l'évaluation environnementale, en fait, je vais vous vraiment lire la citation ici. Du côté touristique, en fait, on dit « Il est cependant clair qu'une industrialisation et un trafic maritime lourd pourraient poser des enjeux en matière de promotion de la destination et pourraient engendrer d'importantes conséquences sur l'image de celle-ci. » C'est-à-dire que la région du Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, le fjord, c'est vraiment un paysage merveilleux, c'est magnifique. Puis, il y a beaucoup d'activités récréo-touristiques et une économie locale bien intégrée basée sur le tourisme, notamment pour justement voir les belugas. Donc, au niveau de la dynamique régionale, il y a des impacts aussi. D'abord, il y a vraiment des inquiétudes pour les municipalités directement touchées qui ont une économie beaucoup centrée autour du beluga. Mais aussi, comme je disais tout à l'heure, tous les autres usages du fjord. Donc, on parle de kayak, des activités de plein air et d'aventure. Dans la région, moi, le témoignage de Anna m'a beaucoup touchée parce qu'en fait, justement, c'est très frustrant. Également, la vision du développement régional est très axée sur l'industrie.
Of the regional development, it opened, I have a hard time understanding what she's saying, I'm sorry. So, the economic solution that talks because jobs talks a lot, and there is a polarization, extreme polarization. It's really tough because it's really polarized. So not many people will want to express themselves. So locally, there's an argument.
Pourquoi la région veut de ce projet-là, mais en fait, c'est vraiment pour invisibiliser l'opposition, en fait, locale. Puis également, c'est ça, il y a aussi des impacts importants sur les communautés autochtones. Donc, je disais tout à l'heure, l'usine, en fait, c'est sur le territoire non cédé du Nitassinan, mais le gazoduc, en fait, va toucher les communautés Innu, Atikamekw et Anishinaabe, donc au travers de la région de l'Abitibi-Témiscamingue, de la Mauricie. Enfin, pour le processus d'évaluation environnementale, donc le projet a été divisé en deux par les promoteurs. Il y a l'usine et il y a le pipeline. L'usine, elle est évaluée au provincial, au Québec et aussi au fédéral. Donc, au provincial, le rapport du BAP a été rendu public en mars. Donc, cet été, on attend une réponse du gouvernement provincial. Du côté environnemental, donc l'évaluation est en cours. Il y a des avis importants qui ont été déposés dernièrement, notamment par Pêche et Océan Canada, qui réaffirme en fait le besoin de protéger le beluga. Puis du côté du gazoduc, les évaluations ne sont pas commencées encore. Donc la mobilisation, pas tout de suite non plus sur le gazoduc, mais peut-être que ça viendrait. Du côté de la mobilisation, justement, on a une mobilisation très forte. Ça a été efficace. On a quand même réussi à mettre le projet sur l'avant-plan, d'en faire un enjeu national. Donc, j'éclore bientôt, mais on a plusieurs groupes qui nous appuient, des scientifiques, des organisations environnementales. Il y a 120 000 signatures qu'on a récoltées avec une pétition, même plus. On a participé au projet, beaucoup de sorties médiatiques. Donc, c'est très attendu maintenant la réponse du gouvernement. Et puis, ces étapes-là ont été complétées. Maintenant, si le projet est rejeté par le gouvernement Legault, à ce moment-là, pour nous, localement, c'est un énorme soulagement. Et puis, si le projet est autorisé, ce n'est pas fini parce qu'il reste encore les évaluations environnementales suivantes au fédéral et au provincial. Donc, ça serait ça. Puis, en fait, ça serait catastrophique pour le climat. Mais comme ce n'est pas fini avec les évaluations environnementales, comme on dit, pas d'usine, pas de pipeline, pas d'usine. Donc, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Camille et Amélie. On espère ne pas avoir à se mobiliser contre le gazoduc. On espère que le gouvernement Legault va rejeter ce projet d'un autre siècle. Parlant de projet d'un autre siècle, il y en a un autre sur la côte est canadienne, donc le projet de Goldboro. Donc, j'inviterai Ken Summers à nous parler de la mobilisation contre ce projet en Nouvelle-Écosse. Ken, you just have to unmute first.
Okay, so I'm Ken Summers in Nova Scotia. By the way, I wanted to sort of say I really like Anna Bean's comment, "Thieves in the night" is how these projects get in. It's funny because they actually did it in the open, but it ends up being they largely sneak in and we get left dealing with them. I think one thing that characterizes both the project in Saguenay in Quebec and ours here in Nova Scotia, Goldboro LNG, is that they're largely wannabe projects. And it's hard to get people to take seriously a project that people just don't really think it's going to happen. And honestly, both projects are not like that likely to happen. But if we don't all act as if they're imminent, then they'll get through. In the case of Goldboro, it's as large a project as LNG Canada in BC. It would increase Nova Scotia's greenhouse gas emissions by 20% in one fell swoop. When we're doing a decent job of bringing our emissions down. I think one of the things that I wanted to sort of put out there is how LNG plants are hard to catch people's imagination about them. As huge as they are, as big a deal as I've always known it's going to be, and all the activists that I ever talked about it with in Nova Scotia, nobody liked it. But once I started to take this project, I've been following this project for 7-8 years, but I really had to start taking it seriously 3 years ago. And for a long time, and really until fairly recently, I was the guy who wrote articles about the project. And activists I knew and activists I worked with, both Mi'kmaq and settlers, didn't want this project to happen, but nobody was really motivated to do anything seriously about it. In fact, I started when I had partners to deal with this project. I got them from across Canada and across Europe before I got them in Nova Scotia. I had everybody encouraging me, but really nobody else working with me in Nova Scotia. And that goes for both Mi'kmaq and settlers. I always felt we have a pattern here in Nova Scotia that when Mi'kmaq take an environmental issue seriously, that's when it takes off. I thought that would happen in the case of of Goldboro, and that is pretty much what happened. When one of the things that happened here, actually what really touched it off was a few months ago when we leaked the fact that the government, that they were asking the federal government for $1 billion. Now that's not going to sound different to the rest of you, but the rest of you are talking about subsidies, which of course Goldboro is going to get if they ever start too. But they're looking at governments to do all the first investment as well. Apparently that was just one thing too many for people, and in the last several months people have really woken up to this project. So here we are. I think one of the things I wanted to sort of touch on too is this whole business of, we're all dealing with projects that come late to the table. Even LNG Canada to some degree, which is the only one that we're sure is going to happen, comes relatively late to the table in the sort of global LNG scheme. The rest of our projects are coming in very late. They have to get in or they're never going to get in, and they're aware of that. They don't talk about that, but they're aware of it. And so now all of a sudden they're all green or trying to be green. So we have in Saguenay, it's hydroelectric power. In BC, there's talk about hydroelectric power. And now we can't, that's no possibility in Nova Scotia. So carbon capture, storage is the big greening thing for LNG projects. It will be for fossil fuel projects in general, and it's something that we're going to increasingly have to deal with. In the case of Goldboro, it gets very complicated because the carbon capture and storage would happen in Alberta, and they want offset credits in Nova Scotia for doing that. So this is another issue that we will face here. But first of all, we just need to make sure they don't get their $1 billion from the federal government. Goldboro has had an easy ride for getting all of its permits, and what it has always lacked is money, and that's what they still lack. It's interesting though that the one thing they never talk about is pipelines. We all know how pipeline access to LNG plants is one of the big weak links. It's a weak link in getting the projects actually off the ground. It's also a mobilizer. In our case, the part that Paraday needs that they don't have is a pipeline through southern Quebec. They don't even talk about it, but we have lots of people organizing in Quebec already, because that's where Paraday will have to run their pipeline through. I think I'll just leave it there, and Robin's going to pick up on what do we do about this project. Robin Tress.
Thanks, Ken. And thank you to everyone who spoke before. It's a real honor to be on such a powerful lineup of people here fighting LNG and fracking across the country. My name is Robin. I'm calling in from Halifax in the land of the Mi'kmaq Nation, unceded, unsurrendered territory. Yeah, Ken and I go back to some other fights. I'm glad to see him here and have him give more details on Goldboro LNG. Like he said, the Paraday Energy, the parent company behind Goldboro LNG, has asked the federal government for a $1 billion subsidy to get this project off the ground, which is like kind of the name of the game for many LNG projects across the country. But for this, in this instance, it would be the very first investment, and obviously an extremely bad, poor one for the government to make. And I don't know if Ken mentioned, but the company has a funding deadline of June 30th. They need to secure some funding for the project by June 30th, which is only 8 days from now. And they need to do that in order to keep up with their agreement with Uniper, the German energy company that has agreed to buy LNG from Paraday with some conditions. And all signs are pointing to that funding not coming through in the next week or so, and that the government will not be giving that money and they won't be getting it anywhere else either. We've already seen, I can only speak from the Council of Canadians, I know other organizations have done work as well to put pressure on MPs to reject this, this subsidy. But what I know of, we've seen more than 5,000 letters sent to MPs and ministers across the country. We've had hundreds of phone calls go into MPs, specifically on the East Coast, because they've been lobbied the heaviest by Perry Day. We met with 4 MPs in the Atlantic region to make the case, and also some of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's top political or policy advisors. And after all of that, we're pretty sure, I'm 99% sure that Perry Day is not going to be getting money from the federal government at this point. But because we're not quite at that deadline, we need to raise our voices one more time just to seal the deal. And obviously we all know this isn't the only fossil fuel subsidy out there. Tracy mentioned earlier, like Woodfibre LNG is also asking for $1.3 billion, which would be a tragedy. And then there are loads of other ways that fossil fuels are subsidized other than just huge chunks of change all at once. We all know, like, the Liberals promised to end fossil fuel subsidies years ago. Since then, they've done that. They've bought a pipeline instead. They've financed the violent separation and the violence on Indigenous peoples who are protecting their lands from pipelines, like Molly was telling us about. These subsidies continue in all kinds of forms. Just last week, we saw the provincial and federal government in Newfoundland bail out Suncor's offshore operations. So it's clear that these subsidies across the board are still standard practice for this government. So I hope that tomorrow we can put in some phone calls to our MPs. So I guess what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to drop a link in the chat in a moment. And I will ask you to use this link to sign up to get a reminder tomorrow via email. I'll paste that there. So if you click on this link and drop your email in the box, the Council of Canadians will send you an email tomorrow morning reminding you to call your MP sometime during the day to tell them not to give the money to Perry Day for the Goldboro LNG project, and to put pressure on Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland to stop all fossil fuel subsidies, as the government has promised to do. So I hope that folks here will feel empowered and informed with all of the information you have here to make that call. So what will happen is you'll include your email, you'll get a reminder tomorrow to make the call, and it's a click to call thing online. So you put in your phone number and your location, and then the computer phones you, connects you to your MP, and then online you get a little script of some potential points you can make to your MP. Although I know you know so much now that you've been at this webinar, you can ad-lib it a little bit to include what you've learned here. So that's the plan for tomorrow. I hope if we can get one more big day of phone calls into MPs from across the country, then we can put some nails in the coffin for Goldboro LNG, and we can kind of share this win and use that momentum to continue fighting all the fights that we heard from folks all across the country here tonight. So that's all from me. That link is there, and it'll be emailed to you, I believe, as well just after this. So maybe I'll turn it back to Peter to close us up here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robin. Yeah, there's so much we can do on each of these fights. Supporting folks who are in court, visiting and witnessing construction, and the fight really for the next 8 days is to stop the government from giving $1 billion to LNG facility that would never run without it. It's sad that they've done that for LNG Canada, and we can't let it happen again. So we have a few minutes left for questions for our panelists. If folks have been using, I've seen a couple folks have answered in the chat, but use the question and answer function to ask some questions. There was one that came up about, and Slato, I'm wondering if you might be able to answer. I saw you answered in the chat, but for folks who haven't been following, the impacts of man camps, on social issues, including murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I had put in the chat the impacts on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. Just the rates of violence that have increased in our community, you know, exponentially. There have been a lot of research studies talking about how man camps and industrial projects like this impact violence against the most vulnerable people in our communities. So there's an increase of drug and alcohol use, an increase of gang violence. We've had young Indigenous women being gone missing in the last several years and found murdered without ever having found their murderers. In one of the communities of Houston, there have been 7 gang-related murders, homicides in a community of 3 with a population of 3,000 people, which is close to where our occupations are, our occupation camps are. A lot of the women that work for CGL along the whole pipeline route in the north, we live along Highway 16, which is the Highway of Tears, where there have been large numbers of Indigenous women and girls gone missing and been found murdered along the Highway of Tears. All the communities along there have women that are working for the pipeline that have reported sexual assaults, sexual harassment, intimidation, threats, death threats, threats of sexual assault from all of the workers that are being brought into these man camps. And so there are studies and so much research that shows these negative effects of and the impacts of man camps in our communities, but we've also experienced that firsthand in our communities with suicides and the deaths and murders of our women.
Maybe I can add that on the East Coast as well with the Goldboro project, that's a primary concern of Mi'kmaq women here. There's a theme, obviously, these projects are super related. So yeah, Mi'kmaq women are working now to be heard because there's never been consultation about this. Like the company brags that it has agreements with the elected like Indian chiefs, and that's just not entirely accurate. And yet there are other like more grassroots oriented organizations that are now working to see real consultation between elected Mi'kmaq governments and their people to make sure that the voices are heard. And then Native Women's Association of Nova Scotia recently put out a statement basically saying what Molly just said. All of these things are such a concern that we can't tolerate this man camp here at all. So yeah, those concerns are definitely not isolated to one project, but are kind of inherent with bringing in huge concentrations of transient workers.
And if I can just add quickly, we actually had a judicial review going against the project certificate for Coastal GasLink, which we just recently lost in court. And one of the main points for the judicial review was relying on the National Inquiry of Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. And one of the recommendations was acknowledging the fact that man camps increase violence against Indigenous women, and that there have to be protocols and stuff put in place so that this doesn't happen, and that the courts ruled that that wasn't necessary. And so that sets a really, really scary precedent for the rest of so-called Canada, that this national inquiry that the government did and spent all this money on and came out with these recommendations that they're actually not legally bound to uphold and actually don't want to implement at all. And so that's really scary for us with all these industrial projects that are proposed through our territories and other territories.
Thanks, Molly. We're running out of time, so I think we'll leave some of the other questions. But you know, I really want to thank all the speakers who came out. I wanted to get to that one important question. I think it's something that we often overlook in terms of resource development across Canada. And so, yeah, just thank you so much for all of the work that all our speakers are doing, for coming in today. Make sure to write and call your MP tomorrow to stop the federal government from giving money to Goldboro LNG. I'm Peter McCartney from the Wilderness Committee, and I'll just pass it over to Emile to close us out.
Merci beaucoup, Peter. Merci beaucoup à tous les panélistes qui ont été présents aujourd'hui. Je suis heureux d'avoir été des vôtres. Je pense qu'on assiste à la naissance d'un mouvement pan-canadien contre le gaz naturel, contre le mythe du gaz naturel comme une énergie de transition. Donc, on va vous envoyer un courriel de suivi d'ici demain matin sur comment éviter le financement à Goldboro, mais va falloir continuer à travailler là-dessus. On se bat contre des bouts de pipeline, contre des bouts de puits d'exploitation. Maintenant, il va falloir unifier les luttes et arrêter pour de bon le gaz naturel comme énergie au Canada. Il est temps de passer à autre chose. On ne peut plus se permettre de vivre dans le passé. Merci à tous d'avoir été présents. C'était très apprécié.